Here, at the heart of the Ndongo kingdom, a civilization flourished under the golden sun.
This land is our legacy. We will never surrender. We demand absolute respect.
History is written by those who survive. But some names refuse to be forgotten.
We will never yield to your rule.
Long before Africa knew her as a legendary queen, before armies marched at her command, before empires feared her name, there was a young woman who chose courage over fear, wisdom over pride, and strategy over surrender. This is the extraordinary journey of Queen Nzinga Mbande.
I do not kneel before mortal men. We meet as equals, or not at all.
One of the greatest rulers in African history. Welcome to African Untold Histories.
I know why you are here.
She will be vulnerable at midnight.
Queen Nzinga proved that true greatness isn't measured by the throne you sit on, but by the people you refuse to abandon. Her courage inspired generations. Her leadership changed history.
Power does not gather friends. It only unmasks my enemies.
Imagine standing against one of the most powerful empires on Earth. Imagine watching your homeland surrounded, your people captured, your allies betrayed, your kingdom collapsing. Now imagine refusing to surrender. Not for a year, not for a decade, but for nearly 40 years. This is the story of a woman who was never supposed to succeed. A woman born into a world controlled by men. A woman who faced invading armies, political conspiracies, betrayal, assassination plots, and colonial expansion. Yet somehow, she survived them all. Today, centuries later, her name still echoes across African history. Not because she inherited greatness, but because she built it. This is the story of Nzinga Mbande, the queen they could not kill. Long before Nzinga became famous, Central Africa was changing. The Kingdom of Ndongo stood among the most important political powers in the region. Its land stretched across fertile territories. Its people traded, farmed, built communities, and maintained complex political systems. Ndongo was not isolated. It was connected to neighboring kingdoms through trade, diplomacy, and occasional warfare. Life was not perfect. No kingdom is. But Ndongo controlled its own destiny. At least for a time. Then the Portuguese arrived. At first, they came as traders. This was not unusual. Trade had always connected distant peoples. Merchants brought goods. Ideas moved across regions. Relationships developed. But what began as trade slowly transformed into something else. Something far more dangerous. The Atlantic slave trade. As demand for enslaved labor increased across the Atlantic world, human beings became a commodity. Entire communities were affected. Political rivalries intensified. External influence expanded. And kingdoms like Ndongo found themselves trapped in a new reality. The Portuguese wanted more than trade. They wanted influence, control, access to people and resources. And whenever local rulers resisted, pressure followed. Sometimes diplomatic pressure. Sometimes military pressure. Often both. The balance of power in Central Africa began shifting. Many leaders struggled to adapt. Some underestimated the threat. Others overestimated their ability to control it. But history was preparing someone different. Someone who watched carefully. Someone who learned quickly. Someone who understood that survival would require more than courage. It would require strategy. Nzinga was born into a royal family. But royalty did not guarantee safety. And it certainly did not guarantee power. From the moment she entered the world, she was surrounded by politics. The kingdom of Ndongo was one of the most influential powers in the region, but influence always attracted competition. Every decision made inside the royal court carried consequences. Every alliance created opportunities. Every mistake created dangers. Most children grow up protected from these realities. Nzinga did not. From a young age, she lived close to power. She saw how leaders spoke when they wanted support. She saw how they spoke when they wanted obedience. She noticed the difference. She listened carefully when elders debated. She watched chiefs negotiate agreements. She observed military commanders discussing threats along the borders. While other children focused on games and entertainment, Nzinga focused on understanding people. And that would become one of her greatest strengths. Because long before she learned how to lead armies, she learned how to read human behavior. She learned that what people said was often different from what they wanted. She learned that loyalty could change. She learned that fear could influence decisions. And she learned that power was rarely as simple as it appeared. Inside the royal court, arguments were common. Different leaders had different priorities. Some focused on trade. Others focused on security. Some believed diplomacy solved problems. Others believed strength solved problems. Young Nzinga paid attention to all of them. She noticed which arguments succeeded. She noticed which ideas failed. Most importantly, she noticed why. Every conversation became a lesson. Every disagreement revealed something. Every alliance taught a principle. Every crisis became a classroom. Years passed, and the young princess developed a reputation. Not because she was loud, not because she demanded attention, but because she understood things. People began noticing that she asked unusual questions. Questions that revealed how deeply she thought. Questions that forced others to examine their assumptions. Questions that often made experienced leaders pause before answering. As she grew older, her intelligence became increasingly difficult to ignore. She understood diplomacy. She understood timing. She understood perception. And perception was something many leaders underestimated. A king might possess soldiers. A chief might possess wealth. But if people lost confidence in them, those advantages could disappear quickly. Nzinga understood that leadership was not simply about commanding others. It was about influence. The ability to shape how people thought. The ability to shape how people reacted. The ability to shape how people believed. This insight would later become one of the foundations of her success. Because wars are not won only on battlefields. Many wars are won in the minds of people long before armies ever meet. As she continued learning, the world around her was changing. Portuguese influence was expanding. Trade relationships were becoming more complicated. Political pressures were increasing, and uncertainty was growing throughout the region. The older generation could feel it. Something was changing. The balance that had existed for generations was becoming unstable. Yet many leaders struggled to understand exactly what was happening. Some believed the changes were temporary. Others believed they could be controlled. Many assumed the old systems would continue working. Nzinga was not so certain. She watched carefully. She listened closely. And she began recognizing patterns. The Portuguese were not behaving like ordinary trading partners. Their ambitions seemed larger. Their interests seemed deeper. Their influence seemed to expand wherever opportunities appeared. What some leaders viewed as isolated events, Nzinga viewed as connected developments. This ability to connect patterns would become one of her greatest advantages. Many people react to events. Nzinga studied them. Many leaders focused on immediate problems. Nzinga focused on long-term consequences. If one alliance shifted, she asked what would happen next. If one region became unstable, she asked who might benefit. If one decision solved today's problem, she asked whether it would create tomorrow's crisis. This way of thinking separated her from many of her contemporaries. Even as a young woman, she was developing the mindset of a strategist. Not because she knew the future, but because she understood cause and effect. She understood that today's actions become tomorrow's realities. And the realities forming around Ndongo were becoming increasingly dangerous. Political divisions deepened. External pressure increased. Regional rivalries intensified. Every year seemed to introduce new challenges. For many people, the future looked frightening. The kingdom appeared to be entering a period of uncertainty. Some feared conflict. Others feared instability. Many feared change itself. But Nzinga saw something different. She saw lessons. Every challenge taught her something about leadership. Every mistake taught her something about decision-making. Every success taught her something about strategy. She was learning from a kingdom under pressure. Learning from victories. Learning from failures. Learning from survival. Without realizing it, she was preparing for responsibilities far greater than anyone imagined. Because history was moving toward a crisis. A crisis that would test kingdoms. A crisis that would test leaders. And a crisis that would eventually test Nzinga herself. The young girl who spent years watching, listening, learning, and thinking, would soon discover whether those lessons were enough. Because the storm approaching Ndongo was unlike anything the kingdom had ever faced before. And when that storm arrived, it would change her life forever.
The gods are bought. Tonight it must be done. If we fail, none of us survive the night.
The borders are breached!
We must hold the line.
Power changes everything. It changes how people see you.
They say the king's men are coming. There is no smoke without fire.
It changes how people treat you. And perhaps most importantly, it changes the number of enemies you have. As Nzinga's influence grew, So did the forces working against her. Some opposed her openly. Others opposed her in secret. Some feared her intelligence. Others feared her ambition. Many feared both. Inside the royal court of Ndongo, loyalty was becoming increasingly difficult to measure. A smile did not always mean friendship. A promise did not always mean commitment. And an ally today could become an enemy tomorrow. Nzinga understood this reality better than most. Years spent observing politics had taught her a difficult lesson. Power attracts loyalty. But it also attracts jealousy. It attracts resentment. And it attracts people who believe they deserve authority themselves. As pressure mounted across the kingdom, whispers began spreading through palace corridors. Private meetings took place behind closed doors. Secret messages traveled between rival factions. Rumors moved faster than facts, and uncertainty became a weapon. Some nobles questioned her leadership. Others questioned her decisions. A few questioned whether she should hold power at all. But criticism alone was not the greatest danger. The greatest danger came from those who stopped arguing and started plotting. The kingdom was facing growing pressure from Portuguese expansion.
We must strike them hard before the winter snows arrive.
But that leaves our own flank completely exposed.
Trade disputes continued. Regional instability increased. And every political disagreement created opportunities for conspirators. Some believed removing Nzinga would solve their problems. Others believed replacing her would strengthen their position. Neither group understood one thing. Nzinga was rarely where people expected her to be. She moved constantly. Not out of fear. Out of awareness. Karma. She understood that predictable leaders become vulnerable leaders. So she adapted. She traveled frequently. Changed sleeping locations. Maintained multiple circles of communication. Limited the number of people who knew her plans. To some observers, this behavior seemed excessive. To Nzinga, it was survival. Because survival is not luck. Survival is preparation. And preparation saved her repeatedly. Stories began circulating throughout Ndongo. Stories of plots that failed. Stories of enemies who underestimated her. Stories of dangers narrowly avoided. Over time, these stories transformed her image. People began speaking about her differently. Not simply as a ruler, but as a figure who seemed impossible to remove. Some believed fate protected her. Others believed ancestors watched over her. Many believed she possessed extraordinary instincts. The truth was simpler. Nzinga paid attention. While others became distracted by status, she remained focused on risk. While others celebrated power, she studied threats. And while others looked at the present, she prepared for the future. That was the difference. Many rulers see danger when it arrives. Nzinga learned to recognize danger long before it appeared. She understood that every victory creates new enemies. Every alliance creates new obligations.
The enemy forces are advancing. They have already crossed the border.
And every moment of success creates new expectations. Leadership was not a crown. It was a burden, a responsibility, a constant balancing act between survival and ambition. But even the most skilled leader cannot solve every problem. The pressure on Ndongo continued increasing. Portuguese influence expanded deeper into the region. Military confrontations became more frequent. Political stability became harder to maintain. Resources became strained. The kingdom was fighting on multiple fronts. Enemies attacked from outside. Division threatened from within. And every day required another difficult decision. Another compromise. Another sacrifice. 4 years, Nzinga resisted. 4 years, she adapted. 4 years, she fought to preserve what remained. But eventually, she faced a painful reality. The kingdom she fought so hard to protect was becoming harder to defend. Not because she lacked courage, not because she lacked intelligence, but because circumstances were changing faster than any ruler could fully control. This realization did not come easily. Leaders become attached to places, attached to symbols, attached to traditions, attached to the memories of what once was. Many rulers stay too long. Many refuse to adapt. Many confuse stubbornness with strength. Nzinga did not. She understood something history teaches again and again. The strongest leaders are not those who refuse to change. The strongest leaders are those who know when change becomes necessary. Sometimes survival requires movement. Sometimes preserving power requires changing location.
Today, we lay the foundation of our new dawn. Matamba will rise stronger than ever before.
And sometimes the future cannot be built where the past once stood. So Nzinga began looking beyond Ndongo, not for escape, for opportunity, not for surrender, for reinvention. This opportunity appeared in Matamba. To many observers, Matamba was simply another kingdom, another territory.
Her power is fading. Soon, she will be nothing.
Another political landscape. But Nzinga saw something different. She saw possibilities. She saw strategic advantages. She saw a future. Most importantly, she saw room to rebuild. Matamba offered something Ndongo could no longer provide. Time, space, flexibility, the ability to create new alliances, the ability to reorganize resources, the ability to build strength rather than merely react to threats. It was not an easy decision. Leaving familiar territory never is.
She does not waver. Let us see if her composure holds.
This bodes ill for us.
Critics immediately questioned her. Enemies celebrated. Rumors spread. Some called it weakness. Some called it retreat. Others claimed her power was ending. But those people misunderstood Nzinga completely. She was not abandoning power. She was repositioning it. She was moving the game to a different board. And once again, she was thinking several moves ahead. History often celebrates dramatic victories, great battles, heroic charges, triumphant moments that fill songs and legends. But some of the most important decisions in history happen quietly. A strategic retreat, a calculated relocation, a decision to preserve strength rather than waste it. These moments rarely appear glorious, yet they often determine the future. Nzinga understood this better than most. She knew that survival itself could be a victory. She knew that preserving leadership could create opportunities later. She knew that living to fight another day was often wiser than fighting a battle that could not be won. And so she moved, not as a defeated ruler, but as a strategist, not as a victim, but as a planner, not as someone running from history, but as someone preparing to shape it. When she arrived in Matamba, she did not find perfection. She found challenges, new political realities, new rivalries, new uncertainties. But she also found something invaluable: a fresh beginning, a chance to rebuild from the ground up, a chance to create a stronger foundation than before, a chance to transform adversity into opportunity. And that transformation would change everything, because Matamba would become more than a destination. It would become a symbol of resilience, a symbol of adaptation, a symbol of leadership under pressure. The kingdom that emerged under Nzinga's influence would become one of the most important centers of resistance in the region, and the woman many thought was finished was only getting started. Every challenge she had faced, every betrayal she had survived, every lesson she had learned, every enemy she had outmaneuvered, had prepared her for this moment. The next chapter of her story would not be about survival alone. It would be about rebuilding. Expanding, strengthening, and proving that true power is not measured by what you inherit. It is measured by what you create after everything seems lost. Nzinga was no longer simply defending what remained. She was building what would come next. And what came next would secure her place among the greatest leaders in African history. Not because she never faced defeat, but because she refused to be defined by it.
We must block their advance at the river. This is where we will make our stand.
Not because she never encountered obstacles, but because she turned obstacles into opportunities. Not because history was kind to her, but because she possessed the courage to shape history herself. And from the hills and forests of Matamba, a legend was reborn.
Out of the ashes of war, a legend is reborn. The kingdom of Matamba will behold your queen.
We must fight or we lose everything. But war will only destroy our people.
Having secured her people's freedom, the Queen stands victorious.
Queen Nzinga's brilliance truly holds the Portuguese at bay.
Yes, she makes our trade routes safe again.
Your Majesty, the enemy forces are advancing from the north.
The negotiation with the Portuguese elevated Nzinga's reputation.
We must secure the flame before the Portuguese advance.
The negotiation with the Portuguese elevated Nzinga's reputation. Across Central Africa, stories began to spread. People spoke about the royal woman who had stood before foreign officials and refused to be intimidated.
Listen to the walls. They remember our names. The soil holds the truth. Hear the ancients.
Merchants carried the story along trade routes.
Never have I seen a leader like Queen Nzinga. True, she holds the Portuguese at bay. Her influence reaches even these
Travelers repeated it around evening fires. Chiefs discuss it in royal courts. And with every retelling, Nzinga's reputation grew. Some admired her courage. Others admired her intelligence. Many admired both. But admiration is a strange thing. It can create allies. It can also create enemies. Because every rising influence changes the balance of power. And power rarely shifts without consequences. The kingdom of Ndongo was living through uncertain times. Portuguese influence continued expanding. The slave trade continued disrupting entire communities. Political tensions remained unresolved. And every leader understood that the future was becoming increasingly unpredictable. The kingdom needed stability. But stability was becoming harder to find.
We must not yield to their demands. Our ancestors watch us now.
Within the royal
We
court,
must fight them
opinions
now.
differed sharply.
That is suicide. We must negotiate. They will never honor any treaty.
Some nobles believed negotiation was the best path. Others demanded resistance. Some wanted peace at any cost. Others argued that surrender would only invite greater demands. The debates became increasingly intense.
We must protect our borders now. Isolation will destroy us. We must not yield.
Let both sides be
Voices
heard.
rose. Alliances shifted. Old friendships weakened. New rivalries emerged. The royal court was no longer simply a place of governance. It was becoming a battlefield of ideas. And at the center of that battlefield stood Nzinga. She observed carefully. She spoke only when necessary. While others argued emotionally, she focused on consequences. She understood that leadership was not about winning arguments. It was about protecting a kingdom. Yet the more influence she gained, the more attention she attracted. Every decision was examined. Every word analyzed. Every success questioned. Some nobles wondered whether her growing popularity threatened their own influence. Others feared her intelligence. A few feared her ambition. History has always produced people who are uncomfortable around capable leaders. Nzinga was learning this firsthand. Still, she remained patient. Patience had become one of her greatest weapons. She understood that power was not seized recklessly. It was built gradually, carefully.
The Portuguese forces are moving from the north. We must intercept them at the river.
Strategically, like a foundation beneath a great structure. Strong foundations take time. Weak foundations collapse. Many leaders seek immediate victories. Nzinga sought lasting strength. As months passed, the situation inside Ndongo became more complicated.
Our borders are shrinking, and the Portuguese advance closer every day.
And my men are divided on who to trust.
Portuguese influence continued growing. Military threats increased. Economic pressures deepened. Entire communities felt the strain.
Warriors,
People worried
we
about the
stand
future.
on the land of our ancestors. They will not take our freedom. Together, we will fight.
Farmers worried about security. Merchants worried about trade. Families worried about survival. Leadership was no longer an abstract concept. It affected every aspect of daily life, and the kingdom needed answers. Yet answers were difficult to find. Every solution carried risks. Every strategy carried costs. The burden of leadership grew heavier. And with that burden came a difficult truth. Leadership can be lonely. The higher a person rises, the fewer people truly understand the weight they carry. Nzinga began experiencing this reality. She could trust only a handful of people completely. Even loyal advisors had limitations. Even trusted allies had interests. And sometimes the most dangerous threats did not come from enemies. They came from disappointment, misunderstanding, ambition. The royal court continued changing. Conversations became more cautious. Private meetings became more common. Whispers filled palace corridors.
The king knows.
Is it true?
We must act now.
Not here.
People smiled publicly while questioning one another privately. Everyone sensed that important changes were approaching. No one knew exactly what those changes would be, but everyone felt them. History often moves quietly before it moves suddenly. This was one of those moments. The kingdom stood at a crossroads. The old order was weakening. The future remained uncertain. And uncertainty creates opportunity. It also creates danger. Nzinga understood both. She spent long nights studying reports, reviewing information, analyzing patterns, looking beyond immediate events. She asked questions others ignored. What would happen if Portuguese influence continued expanding? What would happen if internal divisions deepened? What would happen if leadership failed to adapt? The answers were troubling. Yet avoiding difficult truths would not solve them. Ignoring danger would not remove it. Preparation remained essential. And so she prepared. Not only for the challenges she could see, but also for the challenges she could not yet see. Because history often surprises those who believe they understand it completely. As her reputation continued growing, more people began turning to her for guidance. Chiefs sought her advice. Communities respected her judgment. Warriors admired her resolve. Even some former critics began acknowledging her abilities. Influence was expanding. Responsibility expanded with it. Every expectation placed upon her became another obligation. Every success increased pressure to succeed again.
The king's guards are restless. They know about the gold. A fraying soul from these Simate. Your pain is my own. I have not forgotten you. They burned everything. We have nowhere left to go. I promise you, my people will be protected. Every alliance must be measured. We cannot trust the Portuguese promises. Only our unity will save Ndongo.
Are the guards secured? They suspect nothing.
This was the hidden side of leadership. People see authority. They rarely see responsibility. People see power. They rarely see sacrifice. Nzinga saw both, and she accepted both, because she understood something many rulers never learn. Leadership is service. True leadership exists not for personal glory, but for collective survival. This belief shaped her decisions. It shaped her priorities, and it shaped her future. Meanwhile, political tensions reached new heights.
We cannot agree to these terms! Well, they seek to steal our ancestral lands! We must prepare our men for war!
Several powerful figures within the kingdom began maneuvering for greater influence. Some genuinely believed they were acting in the kingdom's interests. Others pursued personal ambitions. The difference was not always obvious. Motives are rarely visible. Actions reveal them over time. Nzinga watched carefully. She did not underestimate anyone.
Authority is not a privilege. It is a heavy responsibility.
She understood that intelligence could appear in unexpected places. So could ambition. Every alliance was evaluated. Every conversation considered. Every opportunity measured. The stakes were too high for carelessness. Because beneath every political discussion remained a larger reality. The future of Ndongo itself was at stake. Would the kingdom remain independent? Would it survive external pressures? Would it adapt successfully? Or would it become another example of a society overwhelmed by forces beyond its control? No one knew. Not yet. But history was moving forward. And soon events would force decisions that could no longer be delayed. The period of observation was ending. The period of action was approaching. The throne itself seemed closer than ever. Yet the closer Nzinga moved toward greater authority, the more she understood its true nature. The throne was not a reward. It was a responsibility. It was not comfort.
This throne is a burden of service, not a seat of ease.
It was sacrifice. It was not security. It was risk. Many people desired power. Few understood its cost. Nzinga understood it, and despite knowing the cost, she continued forward.
Message for the king!
Because leadership was no longer a possibility. It was becoming a necessity. The kingdom needed strength. The kingdom needed vision. The kingdom needed resilience. And history was preparing Nzinga for exactly that role. The path ahead would not be easy. It would test her intelligence, her patience, her courage, her judgment. But every challenge she had faced so far had prepared her for what came next. The woman who once listened quietly in royal courts had become one of the most influential.
We cannot agree to these terms! Well, they seek to steal our ancestral lands! We must prepare our men for war!
Figures in the kingdom. The observer was becoming a leader. The student was becoming a strategist. And the strategist was moving closer to the throne. A throne surrounded by expectations. A throne surrounded by rivals. A throne surrounded by danger. A throne of thorns. Yet Nzinga did not turn away. She stepped forward. Because some people inherit history. Others shape it. And Queen Nzinga was preparing to shape it.
Her legacy would echo through the ages.
Her leadership changed history. And her legacy still lives today. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to African Untold. Histories for more untold stories of Africa's greatest kings, queens, empires, and civilizations. Until next time, keep history alive.
Reinforce the southern flank immediately.
This is where we will intercept them.
The terrain is in our favor, my queen.
They will not pass.
Onde estamos?
For generations, history has celebrated the victories won on great battlefields. But some of the greatest victories begin with a single decision. Queen Nzinga had made hers. She would not surrender, not to fear, not to betrayal, and certainly not to an empire.
The lines are drawn.
The years ahead would become the most difficult of her life. The Portuguese believed time was on their side. They controlled important coastal settlements. They possessed firearms. They received reinforcements from across the Atlantic, and they expected every African kingdom to eventually accept their authority.
The terms are final. Your signature ensures peace.
Many rulers had already signed unequal agreements. Others had been defeated. Some kingdoms disappeared entirely. The Portuguese believed Ndongo would soon become another chapter in that story. They were wrong.
We will not be broken! Together, we will stand and fight for our home. This land is our legacy.
Because Queen Nzinga understood something that many invading powers failed to recognize. A nation is not defeated simply because it loses territory. A nation is defeated only when its people lose hope. And Nzinga refused to allow hope to die. Instead of waiting behind palace walls, she reorganized her kingdom. Villages strengthened their defenses. Messengers traveled constantly between communities. Food stores were protected. Weapons were produced. Young warriors trained every day. Experienced commanders prepared new strategies. This was no longer simply an army. It was becoming a nation prepared for survival. Nzinga also understood that battles are fought with information. Every movement of Portuguese soldiers was observed. Scouts disappeared into forests for weeks. Merchants carried news between distant settlements. Allies reported enemy movements. Nothing was considered too small to matter. Every detail became intelligence. Every report became preparation. While Portuguese commanders believed they controlled the situation, Nzinga often knew where they were, before they knew where she was.
Get down! Now, strike them! Fall back to the wagons!
It frustrated them. Again and again, their plans failed. Supply lines disappeared, convoys were ambushed, communication broke down. The deeper Portuguese forces entered unfamiliar territory, the more vulnerable they became. The forests, the rivers, the hills, even the seasons became allies of Queen Nzinga. She refused to fight on terms chosen by the enemy. If the battlefield favored Portugal, she withdrew. If the forest favored her warriors, she attacked. If negotiations created an advantage, she negotiated. If war became necessary, she fought. She was never controlled by pride. only by purpose.
In 1641, Queen Nzinga prepared a deadly trap. She was a master of guerrilla tactics. Silent, we will draw them into the interior. Here, our terrain is our greatest ally. They cannot conquer what they do not know.
Many rulers seek glorious victories. Nzinga sought lasting survival. That difference changed history. As resistance continued, her reputation spread far beyond Ndongo. Travelers carried stories across Central Africa. Merchants repeated tales in distant markets. Foreign diplomats heard reports of an African queen.
Queen Nzinga has defeated them again at Ngolela. This map leads directly to the Great River.
Who refused to accept defeat. Some stories grew larger with every retelling. Others mixed fact with legend. People spoke of her courage, her intelligence, her discipline, her ability to disappear before an enemy attack and appear where she was least expected. She became a symbol. To her enemies, she became a problem without an obvious solution. Years passed, wars continued, yet Queen Nzinga remained. Every campaign taught new lessons. Every setback produced new strategies. Every challenge strengthened her resolve. She understood that resistance was not measured by one battle. It was measured by endurance. Empires often expect quick victories. They rarely prepare for decades of determined opposition. Nzinga gave them exactly that. Even when resources became scarce, she refused to abandon her people. Even when allies disappeared, she continued searching for new ones. Even when defeat seemed possible, she planned for tomorrow. That ability, to think beyond immediate hardship, became one of her greatest strengths. Leadership had transformed her. The young girl who quietly observed royal meetings had become one of Africa's most respected rulers. The diplomat had become a military strategist. The princess had become a queen. The queen had become a legend. But her greatest challenge was still approaching, because the struggle between Queen Nzinga and the Portuguese Empire was entering a new phase, one that would test not only her army, but her legacy, one that would determine whether history would remember her as merely another ruler, or as one of Africa's greatest defenders. The battle for her kingdom continued, but now the battle for history had begun, to be continued.
For decades, Queen Nzinga held the line. She stood unyielding against the advancing forces, defining the spirit of resistance.
Most wars are remembered for a single battle, a famous victory, a crushing defeat, a decisive turning point. But Queen Nzinga's war was different. It was not fought over days or months. It lasted for decades. It became a contest of endurance, of patience, of determination. The Portuguese still believed that time favored them. Every year they expected resistance to weaken. Every campaign they assumed would be the final one. But each time they advanced, Queen Nzinga adapted. She no longer thought like a ruler defending a kingdom. She thought like a strategist defending an idea. The idea that her people had the right to determine their own future. This changed everything. She strengthened Matamba into more than a refuge. It became one of the strongest kingdoms in Central Africa. New villages were established. Trade routes expanded. Blacksmiths forged thousands of spearheads, shields, and farming tools. Markets flourished despite the constant threat of war. Fields were cultivated. Families rebuilt their lives. Children were born into a kingdom that refused to disappear.
May the harvest bring abundance to every home. Your strength is the heart of our people. Together we will see our land flourish.
For Queen Nzinga, this was as important as winning battles, because a nation cannot survive on war alone. It must also survive through hope. Yet even as Matamba prospered, danger never disappeared. Portuguese commanders continued launching military expeditions. Some sought territory. Others sought captives for the Atlantic slave trade. Entire communities across Central Africa lived under constant uncertainty. Nzinga understood that military strength alone would never be enough. She needed allies, so she looked beyond her own borders. Messengers traveled across rivers, forests, and mountains carrying gifts, letters, and proposals. She strengthened relationships with neighboring African rulers. She welcomed refugees fleeing violence. Skilled warriors joined her armies. Experienced advisors joined her court. Matamba became not only a kingdom of resistance, but a kingdom of opportunity. People who had lost everything found a new beginning under Nzinga's protection. This increased her influence. It also increased Portuguese concern. The longer she remained independent, the more she inspired others. Stories of Queen Nzinga spread far beyond Angola. Merchants carried her name into distant markets. Travelers spoke of a queen who outwitted generals. Missionaries described a ruler of remarkable intelligence. European officials wrote reports expressing frustration over her resilience. Some admired her diplomacy. Others feared her determination. Few underestimated her anymore. Years passed. Some of the soldiers who had first marched against her grew old. Some never returned home. Yet Queen Nzinga remained on her throne. She continued leading councils, reviewing military reports, meeting foreign envoys, inspecting villages, listening to her people. Age brought experience, not surrender. Her greatest weapon had never been her spear. It had always been her mind. She knew when to negotiate, she knew when to fight, she knew when to wait. And perhaps most importantly, she knew that survival itself could become victory. Eventually, the endless conflict began exhausting both sides. The Portuguese realized that conquering Queen Nzinga would require enormous resources that could be used elsewhere. Meanwhile, Nzinga understood that every year of peace meant another year for her people to rebuild. Once again, diplomacy returned. Negotiations reopened. Messages crossed battle lines. Old enemies sat together once more. Not because trust suddenly existed, but because both sides understood the cost of endless war. Queen Nzinga entered these negotiations from a position she had earned. Not through surrender, but through endurance. She had survived what many believed impossible. She had defended her people for decades. She had preserved the independence of her kingdom. She had proven that African rulers could negotiate with European powers as equals, not as subjects. This was perhaps her greatest victory, not a battlefield triumph, but a political one. History often celebrates the clash of armies, yet the agreements that follow those clashes can shape generations. Queen Nzinga understood that lasting peace required as much wisdom as war. Her people began rebuilding without the constant fear of immediate invasion. Trade slowly expanded, communities recovered. Fields once abandoned produced food again. Children grew up hearing stories of the queen who never accepted defeat. Those stories would outlive every battle, and Queen Nzinga herself was becoming more than a ruler. She was becoming a symbol, a living reminder that courage is measured not by the absence of fear, but by the refusal to surrender to it. Her journey, however, was approaching its final chapter. The battles had forged her, the years had strengthened her. Now history would decide how the world would remember her. Yet even as diplomacy returned, Queen Nzinga never confused peace with permanent security. She had spent too many years watching promises disappear, too many years seeing treaties broken, too many years learning that vigilance was the price of freedom. So while ambassadors exchanged gifts, her commanders continued training soldiers. While merchants reopened trade routes, blacksmiths continued forging spears. While villages celebrated harvests, watchtowers remained occupied. Peace, she believed, should never become an excuse for complacency. History had taught her that kingdoms often fall, not when danger arrives, but when leaders believe danger has disappeared. Nzinga refused to make that mistake. She visited villages across Matamba. She listened to elders. She met farmers who had returned to their fields after years of war. She spoke with merchants whose caravans once again crossed rivers and forests. She inspected newly built settlements. She encouraged families to rebuild their homes. To Queen Nzinga, the sound of children playing safely was as meaningful as any military victory. because this was the future she had fought to protect. Not endless war, but lasting peace. As the years passed, her court became one of the most respected political centers in Central Africa. Foreign envoys traveled long distances seeking audiences with the Queen. Some came to negotiate trade, others came seeking alliances. Some simply wished to meet the woman whose name had spread across continents. Visitors often expected to meet only a warrior. Instead, they encountered a stateswoman, a ruler capable of discussing diplomacy, commerce, religion, and military strategy with equal confidence. Her reputation continued to grow, not because she claimed greatness, but because she earned respect. She had outlived governors. She had negotiated with kings. She had defeated generals. She had preserved her kingdom through one of the most turbulent periods in Central African history. Few rulers anywhere in the world could claim such an achievement. Yet Queen Nzinga rarely spoke of personal glory. Her attention remained fixed on her people. She believed the strength of a ruler could be measured by the stability of the kingdom. Were the markets full? Were the farms producing food? Were roads safe for travelers? Were children growing up without fear? These questions mattered more to her than titles or monuments, because a throne was never the destination. It was a responsibility renewed every day. Meanwhile, a new generation was coming of age. Many of them had never known a world without Queen Nzinga. To them, she was not merely a historical figure. She was their queen, their protector, their symbol of resilience. Parents told stories about her courage around evening fires. Warriors repeated tales of her brilliant strategies. Elders reminded the young that freedom had never come without sacrifice. Slowly, those stories became part of the kingdom's identity. The legend of Queen Nzinga was growing, while she was still alive. Even her enemies began acknowledging what they had once refused to admit. This was no ordinary ruler. She had changed the balance of power in Central Africa. She had demonstrated that diplomacy could stand beside military strength. She had shown that intelligence could overcome overwhelming odds. And she had forced one of Europe's great colonial powers to recognize her as a leader they could neither ignore nor easily defeat. For Queen Nzinga, this was never about proving herself to history. It was about ensuring that future generations inherited more than memories of defeat. They would inherit a kingdom that had resisted, a people who had endured, and a legacy built on courage rather than surrender. The war had lasted a lifetime, but so had her determination. And as Queen Nzinga entered the later years of her reign, the world around her had changed forever. The woman who had once struggled to protect her kingdom had become one of the most respected rulers on the African continent. Her greatest battles were behind her, but her greatest legacy was only beginning. The years of conflict had changed Central Africa forever. Kingdoms had risen, others had disappeared, alliances had formed and dissolved. Empires had expanded, but through every victory, every setback, and every uncertain season, Queen Nzinga remained. Her endurance became one of her greatest achievements. She had survived political conspiracies. She had survived invasions. She had survived betrayal. She had survived years of relentless warfare. Most rulers are remembered for a single great victory. Queen Nzinga was remembered because she refused to disappear. By now, her name carried weight far beyond the borders of Ndongo and Matamba. Across Central Africa, people spoke of a queen who refused to bow, a queen who turned diplomacy into a weapon, a queen who transformed adversity into opportunity. Her story traveled with merchants, it crossed rivers with traders, it spread through villages by word of mouth. Long before books recorded her life, the people had already made her a legend. Even Portuguese officials began writing about her with a mixture of frustration and respect. Some had expected a quick conquest. Instead, they found decades of resistance. They discovered a leader who understood both war and peace, a queen who could negotiate one day and command an army the next, a ruler who refused to allow fear to shape her decisions. That reputation could not be erased. As Queen Nzinga grew older, her pace slowed, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. She still attended royal councils. She still questioned advisors. She still studied reports from distant provinces. She still listened before making decisions. Experience had taught her that wisdom often begins by listening. The young princess, who once observed quietly in the royal court, had become the elder stateswoman others now came to hear. Generations looked to her for guidance. Young commanders sought her advice before campaigns. Chiefs respected her judgment. Foreign envoys valued her counsel. She had become more than a queen, she had become an institution. Yet through all her accomplishments, Queen Nzinga never forgot the cost of leadership. She remembered the villages destroyed by war, the families separated by conflict, the sacrifices made by ordinary people whose names history would never record. Those memories remained with her. They reminded her why she had chosen resistance, not for personal glory, not for power, but because she believed her people deserved the right to determine their own future. That belief never changed. As the sun began setting on one of the most extraordinary reigns in African history, Queen Nzinga could finally look upon a kingdom that still stood. It had been tested, it had suffered, it had endured, and it remained free. For many rulers, that alone would have been enough. But Queen Nzinga's greatest achievement was not simply preserving a kingdom. It was proving that courage, intelligence, patience, and resilience could stand against even the mightiest empire. Her war had lasted a lifetime, but so had her commitment to her people. The battles were beginning to fade. The scars remained. Yet from those scars emerged something stronger than victory, a legacy. One that would inspire generations long after the sound of war drums had fallen silent. But every remarkable journey must eventually reach its final chapter. And for Queen Nzinga, that chapter would not be defined by the way she fought. It would be defined by the legacy she left behind. The warrior queen had defended her kingdom. Now history would decide how the world would remember her. To be continued.
For millennia, empires rose and fell, leaving their mark on history, only to crumble into dust.
Queen Nzinga did not just build a kingdom. She created a thriving legacy.
She was a master of diplomacy. Her legacy still echoes through time.
History often remembers kings by the lands they conquered, generals by the battles they won, empires by the territories they claimed. But some leaders leave behind something far greater, a legacy. For Queen Nzinga, that legacy had already begun long before her final days.
Queen Nzinga did not just build a kingdom. She created a thriving legacy.
The endless wars, the broken treaties, the sacrifices had transformed more than a kingdom. They had transformed an entire generation. For decades, the people of Ndongo and Matamba had looked to one woman for guidance. One woman who refused to surrender. Now, the years of constant warfare were finally behind her. Her kingdom stood, her people endured, and for the first time in decades, peace lasted. Yet Queen Nzinga never allowed peace to weaken her vigilance.
We must draw them into the valley. Here, our knowledge of the terrain is our greatest weapon. Wait for my signal, then...
She still attended council meetings. She still questioned every report brought before her. She still inspected soldiers. She still reviewed the kingdom's defenses. Age had slowed her body, but never her mind. Every decision she made reflected decades of experience. Young commanders gathered around her, not simply to receive orders, but to learn. She became a teacher, a mentor, a living library of leadership. They studied how she negotiated, how she defeated stronger enemies, how she turned diplomacy into a weapon, how she transformed defeat into opportunity. The next generation realized they were witnessing history while it was still alive. Foreign envoys continued arriving in Matamba. Some came seeking alliances. Others sought trade. Many simply wished to meet the legendary queen whose name had spread across Africa and Europe. They expected to meet an aging ruler. Instead, They encountered a woman whose wisdom had only grown sharper with time. Queen Nzinga understood something many rulers never learned. Power is temporary. Legacy is forever. She invested in her kingdom's future. Roads expanded. Markets flourished. Agriculture prospered. Trade routes connected distant communities. Churches, traditional leaders, merchants, and village elders all found a place within her carefully balanced government. She ruled not through fear, but through stability. That stability became her greatest victory. She had proven something extraordinary, that an African kingdom could resist, adapt, and survive against one of Europe's greatest colonial powers. She had rewritten what many believed was possible.
Queen Nzinga did not just lead her people. She redrew the map of Central Africa. She changed history forever.
Every child born during those peaceful years inherited something priceless. Freedom, not perfect freedom, not permanent security, but the opportunity to build a future that their ancestors had fought to preserve. Queen Nzinga knew that no ruler lives forever, but ideas could outlive empires. She encouraged future leaders to protect the kingdom, not merely with weapons, but with wisdom. Because kingdoms conquered by fear rarely survive, kingdoms built on unity often do. As her final years approached, the queen spent more time listening than speaking. She walked through villages. She greeted farmers returning from harvest. She blessed children playing beneath towering baobab trees. She thanked elderly warriors who had stood beside her through decades of conflict. Every face reminded her why she had chosen resistance. Not for glory, not for power, but for her people. Then, after one of the longest, most extraordinary reigns in African history, Queen Nzinga's journey came to an end. The kingdom mourned. Warriors lowered their spears. Royal drums fell silent. Across Ndongo and Matamba, an entire nation grieved. But legends never truly die. Queen Nzinga left behind more than a throne. She left behind an idea. That courage can outlive fear. That wisdom can overcome force. That determination can outlast empires. Centuries later,
Queen Nzinga's legacy bridges centuries. From ancient archives to modern minds, her spirit still inspires.
Her story continues to inspire historians, leaders, students, and millions of Africans around the world. Statues now honor her memory. Books tell her story. Documentaries preserve her legacy. Her name has become a symbol of resilience, not only in Angola, but across Africa and beyond. The Portuguese built forts. Queen Nzinga built hope. Empires rose, empires fell, but the warrior queen remained unforgettable. Today, when people speak of Africa's greatest rulers, her name stands among the very first, not because she sought greatness, but because she earned it. She proved that leadership is measured, not by how much power one possesses, but by how many people one protects. The girl who once watched her father rule became the queen who changed history. The warrior who refused surrender became the legend the world would never forget. This is the legacy of Queen Nzinga, a queen, a warrior, a diplomat, a nation builder, and one of the greatest leaders Africa has ever known.